welcome to another episode of The Modern Nerd. I am Sir Slice.
I'm his merchandise.
And I'm GJC.
And we are, as always, massive nerds. Now, for this episode, I'm going to be handing over the reins for the most part over to Senor GJC.
Hello.
So he's going to be taking over our little intros and guide us through the episode today, discussing episodes 1 through 4 of Fallout, now on Amazon Prime. George, go ahead and take it away.
So, thank you, Sir Slice and Smarch. And Slice thought it would be nice for one of us who's played the game and watched the show kind of take the lead on it. So I decided to, I guess, give this a try. The show takes place in the Fallout universe. For those of you who don't know, it's a video game series made by Bethesda, who's known for a lot of other major games, Starfield being one of the more recent ones, right? And it's a post-apocalyptic world. It's a hard word to say. It's a war that essentially is between the United States and China, and it culminates in the year 2077 with a nuclear apocalypse that pretty much destroys both countries and large parts of the world. The series takes place in 2281, which by the timeline, from what it sounds like, is the furthest along in history we've seen even in the game series. And just like what you imagine a post-apocalyptic world, there's a lot of different factions, a lot of different tribes. Each faction sort of has its own unique motives and motivations and characteristics, and they're all competing for what limited resources there are left in the wasteland that is the Earth, essentially. We're going to dive into it. We're not going to really talk much about like a synopsis of the characters, just a brief one or what's going on, because we assume that you've watched episodes 1 through 4. So we're just kind of dive into the nitty gritty of all these characters and kind of dissect them and what we think of them. Okay. So it's a little bit different. We're kind of doing it like we would dissect an RPG game, sort of, because in a video game, you don't always play things in order and you don't always meet characters in order. So we're just going to play it that way. So first, I'll kick this right off, is we're introduced immediately to a character named Cooper Howard. He's played by Walton Goggins. You probably have seen him in things like the Django Unchained and also Justified. Amazing in both of those. He's in everything as the cowboy. Do with like a
Western. He's in it.
He's in it. He's in it. Yeah, he's in it. He's that guy. And then a brief background about Cooper is he's actually an actor who plays a cowboy before the war. He had a daughter and a wife. And he has survived since the bombs fell in 2077, and he's now a ghoul, which is kind of like a walking zombie, but he walks and talks like a normal human being, and sounds like he's been working the last 200 years as a bounty hunter. So he's a very stereotypical archetype you see in a lot of survival games and Survivor series in general. We call that like generically like a wastelander. He does what he needs to do to survive. He's the one that really doesn't have any moral code. He's just like survival and like me first, no rules whatsoever in the wasteland, because that's the way you become a survivor, because the wasteland doesn't have any rules. Immediately when I saw this character, what came to my mind, aside from the series of video games I've been playing in Fallout, is I thought of Book of Eli, Denzel Washington's character, very much so like this guy who knows his way around, is dangerous in the wasteland, lives by certainly he has some kind of code, but is much more, has seen the gamut. So he's very cautious and he does what he needs to survive. And he's also in many ways similar, because he's escorting something that is like an innocent, you can say a babe or a child or woman, whatever it is, that extra partner that he meets who is completely a babe in the woods. And it kind of even reminds me of like the Transporter and a lot of different, not always just a post-apocalyptic character. It could be many different characters who have to take care of somebody who's inexperienced in the ways of the world, Tim, is there somebody who you think is kind of similar to this character that you can think of?
I mean, all of them, nothing comes to mind off the top of my head, but what I can say about the character is that it's like, I don't know if he's a good guy yet or a bad guy. Like he's kind of a bad guy because he's a dick to everyone, but at the same time I'm like, well, I don't really want him to die because he's an interesting character and I like it. And like as you're watching these, you get to see his background and like what he was doing before the bombs dropped, and so that was kind of really interesting. And so I can't think of anything off the top of my head for me that fits my view of this character, because it is, you know, a little bit more walking the line, kind of good and bad, but is kind of still a dick about everything. So I love him though. I'm super happy to see him take this role and really run with it, because in everything else I've seen him in, he's just like a bit actor or a minor character actor part in all of these other movies or shows. I haven't watched Justified, so he probably got some more screen time in that, most likely, if he was in it for a while. But you know, I don't know. But what I've seen him in, he's had just little minor roles, and he's got a lot more kind of scenery, and his voice really fits for this role as like that old cowboy western type role. He kind of actually, now that I think about it, reminds me of Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's literally an actor playing a cowboy character, but he's also a dick to everybody. And it's like literally the same archetype from that role. Obviously this is going to be taken more into like, he is more villainous than, you know, that character, but it just sort of, I see a little similarity. So that's my take on the Cooper Howard character. That's all I got.
I mean, yes, and I don't know. I think this is a story we've seen played out 1,000 times before. He's a good guy who's been around for so long that he became, you know, you either die a hero or become the villain. And he's kind of become the villain, but he doesn't mean he's the villain. Like, I mean, he's very clearly going to be a good guy by the end of this whole thing. We saw the end of episode 4, watching like, you know, his old heroic self, and in my opinion, being inspired. Like, seemed like a sweet guy with his daughter before the bombs fell, and I think he's still that guy, but he's just, you know, being in the wasteland can turn the nicest of men into, well, that. I look forward to seeing him come back around toward the end of the show, because I just think, you know, he's played the asshole so many times where it's like, of course they want us to think that he's like the bad guy, and it would be perfect, and it will be good when he finally decides to come around. Yeah, you know. Kind of typical, but I'm so in love with this show so far that like I'm like, they get a pass. Like, they can do some kind of stereotypical archetypes, and it's great.
Yeah. So what do we got next? We got Lucy Maclean is the next one on our list that we're going to kind of talk about. I wanted to introduce this character because it is also the John McClane's daughter's name from the Die Hard series.
Really?
So I thought that, yeah, the whole thing, yeah, in Live Free and Die Hard. I mean, like, you hear it in the first one. He calls her Lucy Gennaro and everything, but then I'm like, so the whole time I'm just like, every time I hear somebody say Lucy Maclean, I'm just like, where's Bruce Willis? Where is he? Where is this son of a bitch
Bruce
doing
Willis.
something ridiculous?
Oh, Bruce Willis.
Yeah, so played by Ella Burnell. I've never seen her in anything before personally, but she's in Yellow Jackets and Arcane. She's
in Kick-Ass too.
Who
Kick-Ass too. She plays like one of the mean girls in the high school.
Oh, all right, well, fine, sure. Yes. Lucy's a vault dweller whose family has lived underground since the apocalypse, and she's on a quest to find her father, who was kidnapped by raiders inside the vault. The naivete is through the roof, and it drives me a little crazy. She is innocent to a fault. Probably, I think 4, she kind of is seeing the light of day really a little bit more when she's get in that super duper mart and everything. But it's just naive to the literal point of, I just want to shake her and be like, wake the fuck up. Like, Jesus, it's almost annoying. She does it so well, though, that I'm just like, all right, no, this actually is perfect. Like, so perfect. So, you know, I see where her arc is going in a sense. You know, she's going to get corrupted. You know, she's going to kind of embrace the ways of the wasteland. So I'm excited for that, to kind of see a little bit more. Yeah, I'm excited. She's great in this show. And I couldn't would be more excited. George, what was your question here?
My question is like her story kind of plays out like a lot of RPG video games or just video games in general, where at least a lot of side quests. You can see she's being kind of pulled in a lot of different directions, even though her ultimate end goal is to be reunited with her father, right? So it's like, oh, I gotta like meet this like random ghoul, and I gotta find this random man and take him to this. It's like the MacGuffin keeps changing, you know, like it eventually, yes, this story brings them all together to the finding of this head and whatever is inside this head, but she's being pulled in like so many different little side quests, seems like directions on the way to just essentially just to find her dad, which is a very, I mean, not to spoil any stories of the Fallout games, it's a very typical Fallout story game. Is like, I want to find my so-and-so or my dad, my child, whatever it is, you know, but I'm being pulled in all these different twists and turns. So the question is like, does this story kind of remind you of another game that you might have played outside of the Fallout series that has that kind of mechanic? Dan?
Oh, okay, sure. I had a hard time with that question because there's a lot that do and not really. But I mean, it did, you know, how should we get sidetracked or how things would play out. Definitely reminded me of most quest-based games like Fallout or The Witcher or Skyrim. Just like, you know, cue the Bryan Cranston meme of like from him Malcolm in the Middle, like going to do one thing and you need to change the light bulb to go to get the WD-40 to go get the car. That's you know, there's similarities there. Her story is interesting. And the way that this is playing out is, you know, like the Fallout games, you usually, it's kind of unexplained, but whoever you're playing as in the game kind of just comes out like guns blazing. Like they just kind of know how to do everything because there's kind of not a lot of time to like they don't have time to build a story about how you learned how to like load a gun or like use this or this, you know, all these little things. And this time they're really starting from scratch with this character. And it is like Tim said, it can be a little frustrating. Like the naivety is like through the roof, but like it is kind of necessary, especially if you haven't watched Fallout before, and for fans of the games, or sorry, if you haven't played Fallout before, but whether you've played them or not, this kind of like beginning to her story is a necessity, and it's kind of opening a door to the fact that we're really seeing like a strong commentary on privilege in this show. And how people with privilege don't think they're all that privileged. And it's like, this is just how it is, right? No, it's not. It's very different for everyone else. And it was not something I was ready for because they almost never acknowledge that in any of the other Fallout games. Like how these people come from the vaults have had it pretty easy. I mean, Fallout 4 was different. But like Fallout 3, the character you're playing as lived a nice, full, comfortable life like beneath a vault. And granted, this vault seems like it has a bit more going for it in certain areas, but regardless, it's very interesting to see that play out from her point of view. And it is a little frustrating at times, but it is a necessity that we do need to see play out from her privileged point of view. And I do look forward to her character arc. She already is getting pretty hardened by the end of episode 4, and that's fun to see.
Yeah. I think for me, just the way the pacing and the stories are being told, especially those first couple of episodes, reminds me a lot of GTA 5, where in the beginning you don't, yes, you Trevor and there's that little bit of backstory, but essentially for the core of the game until they all meet up, like the three main characters of GTA don't really interact until like here and here, but it's like they come together, and it's interesting to see how the storylines are intertwined, how each of them have their own motives, how they all get pulled into different side quests while essentially trying to meet the same end goal that they're chasing for, which is to be, you know, in Fallout. In GTA, it's more about being free and having a lot of money and that kind of thing, more selfish goals in that sense. But I love the way that the stories intertwined in both these franchises, kind of, and these stories found a really good way to tie all these storylines together.
The only other thing I can really think of, and this one, both these first two, the last question and this one were kind of like rough for me, but maybe like the Portal games, because like you're this character who like really has no idea what's happening or what is going on outside of their little experiment that they're a part of, which it seems like these vaults almost are an experiment. I don't know, whatever, but like there's like a little similarity for me in playing that main character from Portal 2 specifically, because the first one didn't dive as much into like narrative, but Portal 2 really kind of did. So I mean, I'm seeing it a little bit just on that like innocence and naivete, and then kind of as the game progressed in Portal, the character is clearly more like, what the hell are you talking about? There's some sort of crazy conspiracy happening, and I need to get out of here. The world isn't over, like that kind of stuff. And the end of that first game or that second game, when everything gets like tumbling down, it's kind of cool to see outside. So it's like kind of like having your world rocked, and then it being the shock of seeing the outside world, which she's handled pretty well. You know what I mean? The way she's interact with everyone's like, excuse me, I would like to intervene. And you're just like, oh my God, oh my God. I'm just sitting there like waiting for someone to walk up to her and slap her or some shit. Just, those moments are hilarious to watch for me. I love them. She is so good at that too. So it's especially when she's like trying to talk down the Ghoul, Cooper Howard character. It's just, she's like, well, and then by the time we interact, we can see that you're the aggressor, so I would have no force, I'm just like, this is fucking hilarious. Like, oh my God. So it's solid. As Dan has reiterated, I am absolutely fucking loving this show on so many different levels, and I never played any of them enough to understand what the hell is going on or have any sort of spoilers in my head. So I'm very excited to form my own little conclusions as the show continues. Because I will say this one last bit. I've not been able to accurately predict the events that happen. I can kind of get the overall, but like this show, it's just like suddenly something is changing, and I'm just like, holy shit, like this is awesome. Like, progression and things happening, and not just the same formulaic bullshit we get from other Marvel studios all the time. So, but yeah, no, this is a fantastic, the M word. This is a fantastic show. Jesus. That's it. That's all I got. Okay. Next, who's next?
And then we're gonna move on to another character we're introduced to. Maximus, played by Aaron Moten. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's been in things like Disjointed and Emancipation, which I believe was a Will Smith movie that came out in 2002. From what it
came out, and he made it after the slap. So
it was he made it after the slap. Okay, well,
yeah, it was one of the movies where he came back and was like upset with people for not watching it because it's about a very important topic, but nobody wanted to see it because he was in it, and everyone was like, "Well, you're now a piece of shit." And so I was like, "Oh, okay."
Brief background about Maximus is that he's a squire raised in a military faction called the Brotherhood of Steel. He is tasked to a knight in search of a scientist who's a defector from another faction. Sorry. They kind of worship technology is what it seems like. During the course of the events in the beginning of the first couple episodes, the knight that he essentially has been attached to dies from a bear attack, and he decides to let the knight die instead of helping him and take over the mission and pretending to be the knight. So he's now walking around with this power armor pretending to be the knight that he was supposed to squire for. And the archetype is like a military background. He has a better understanding of what's going on in the wasteland, but he's still pretty sheltered and naive, very unproven kind of, even though he has some minor skills. And yeah, he obviously has been brainwashed or told a different story of what's going on in the wasteland than probably what has really happened. So I would say on the scale of like naivete from Lucy to Cooper, he's more in the middle kind of about what he knows and skill-wise kind of too as well.
I'm going to go quick shout out to Michael Rappaport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. He's the knight that
just
died from the bear attack. I didn't expect him actually, to be honest. So that's amazing.
It's good that he's so good. Like I never really like it when he's in something, but he always does a pretty good job in whatever random bit part he's been cast. So I will give it up to him.
Yeah.
So one of the things that sort of kicks off his Maximus's story is that originally he wasn't supposed to be the squire. He replace somebody else who was in his a fellow trainee who was in his squadron kind of, or in the base with him, who was friends with him. He replaced that girl's spot and became the squire to this knight. What causes that is that this friend of his stepped into a boot that was covered essentially in razors inside the boot, and it cut up her leg, so she wasn't able to help this knight in the mission of finding this scientist who defected from another faction. And so kind of because of the moral grayness of this character, I thought probably one of the biggest questions that kind of reveal your kind of Rorschach test is like, do you think that he's the one who put the razor in the boot? From what you've seen so far, what makes you think so? And yeah, so Tim,
I don't think he did. I did watch ahead, which doesn't answer any questions, but I from what I've seen through the first 4 episodes, especially at that point in time in the first episode, and right, whatever it was,
the first episode.
I think he was too cowardly still at that point to do literally anything, to take any action in a positive or a negative way. I think he was clearly frustrated by that point in time because he was on toilet duty, which probably seemed like the umpteenth time that he was doing it. But I don't think that he put it in there. I think he was genuinely surprised because he was the first one over to see and check if he was okay. He's his literally only friend, so I don't think he would probably do that necessarily. That's just me. I know that there's going to be some, like, I can see how it would be taken another way, but I really don't. I don't think he did it, especially seeing him in those first 3 or 4 episodes.
I think that we are meant to constantly question the morality of this character. For how long we'll be doing that, I don't know, but I think he's not my favorite, but they've made a good complex character. I think this guy would use the name of being good and righteous and helping people all the way to all kinds of death and destruction. I think he is beyond delusional, and just literally the doing what's good and what's right is so far above any sort of morality that he might have that he would use its good name to murder thousands. And like, I think we could, in my opinion, we could be witnessing maybe one of the villains of the story. But I don't think he would see it that way. And I wonder, and I think we are as an audience meant to constantly, like, we're never going to get an answer on if he put the razor blades in the shoes, and I think that in of itself is a metaphor for how we're supposed to view the character. Is he a good guy or a bad guy?
Yeah,
that's what I think we're going to be.
Yeah, I think that's the point that we're trying to drive in there.
Deep.
Yeah, that's really why I asked the question, and I think, like, I agree with Dan that he's obviously flawed. In my personal opinion, from what I've seen up to episode 4, and maybe not to give away a little bit beyond that, I think he did it because I feel like when he's forced to make a decision, he constantly makes, like, when there's nothing, like, and by decisions, I mean, like, when he's forced to make a decision about his own personal goals, and he always chooses the selfish thing. He didn't really help Lucy to help Lucy. He helped Lucy and that scientist because he needed that scientist to bring back to the Brotherhood. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes, it seemed like he was being altruistic, seemed like he was saving the town from the ghoul that was shooting it up. But really, is that really his goal? Or was it essentially what Dan said? Out of the name of self-righteousness, he will use that as an excuse to do whatever he wants because he knows the wasteland well enough to know there are no rules except for the one who you make. Like, that's what it is. And that's kind of the story. His story is that I can use whatever means that I want as long as I achieve my end goal of, for my purely selfish reasons. Let's be honest. He wants to be forgiven, and he wants to be known as a great knight who saved, the Brotherhood and whatever. It's not because he really wants to, like, help people, kind of. I don't see that. I'm not sure, like.
I think he was trying to impress Lucy in that moment a little bit.
Maybe
that what brought him in there. But when you see their little connection, like, he's smiling, she's smiling, and I'm like, he likes her. I think he likes her. He does,
obviously.
Sure.
He definitely likes her, but I just don't like. I feel like when he was forced to make these decisions, he seems to pick really selfish reasons and selfish decisions. Like, he let the knight die when he could have saved him, even though the knight was an asshole. And yeah, you can say he deserved it, but did he really deserve to die just for being an asshole? Like, I don't know. So that's what makes me think that he put the razor blades in the boot. But I think Dan is right. We might never find out.
Yeah,
and that's a great metaphor for the character itself.
It was a solid breakdown. I never really saw him that way. And I've even watched a couple extras, so I don't know. Yeah, now you're making me rethink everything that he's done and being like, well, wait a minute.
We could definitely circle around back to that when we watched all of it. Dan is going to take us through Norm, right? Norm Maclean.
So Norm is a great character in that it literally, even in this little podcast breakdown, he's like the last, but not in the least, in my opinion. He's the younger brother to Lucy. And after helping Lucy escape, after she's gone after, her dad and his dad, he's starting to really sniff around and see that there's way more going on than what we could ever possibly imagine. The end of episode 4, stuff really started to happen, and they snuck back into Vault 32, and they saw that these people that were all corpses had been dead for 2 years. He's on to something, and I like his nature, and I think we as an audience appreciate his point of view, because I don't know about you, but when I was watching, everyone's like, what should we do to these people? He's just kind of like, we should probably kill them. And everyone's like, oh my God, we would never. And, me, I'm sure so many people were like, yeah, you idiots. Like, you were feeding these people that tried to kill you, like giving away resources. Like, yeah, fucking kill them. I think, well, I'll get to what I think in a little bit, but I think he's been, I think this actor is perfect for the role, because I think he's not just in physical stature, but in actuality been kind of left by the wayside, and people forget about him. And I think that is their fault for underestimating him. I think he's destined for some pretty great things, personally. So he's not at the forefront of the story. I mean, I think I'm invested in him because personally, I'm not that into most of the characters in this show. I'm kind of like, Lucy's too naive for me to understand where she's coming from. The Ghoul, I think, is playing out a very old archetype, and I think will ultimately be a character arc, a tale as old as time. And I will say I'm slightly interested in Maximus, but his being self-righteous is a little annoying. I'm most interested in Norm personally, but is it enough to rank among the other storylines? Does it work well in the confines of the Vault?
I think that this is a wonderful introduction, Dan, and I think that's the heart of this heart of this character storyline, is that he does seem like he was just sort of like a side character to Lucy's, like a plot device, because Lucy is obviously out of the Vault now, so she can't discover some of the history in the past of what was going on from where she came from, right? For all she knows is everything's been dandy and honky-dory since day one, but Norm somehow, as kind of a malcontent and underachiever from what it looks like, he's always like just been like, these rules kind of suck, and like he's always kind of seemed to not question authority, but has always already been like apathetic to the rules of the way that they're living in the rules of the Vault. So he's, in many ways, I would think like it'd be interesting to put Norm outside the Vault and Lucy be the one that stayed in, how that would kind of play out, because he has the mindset of someone who's kind of suspicious of everyone and everything around him. So maybe he would be a little bit safer in the wasteland because he thinks of the world and sees the world in a slightly different way, because of, I guess, his own personal experiences in the Vault and just who he is as a person. But like I said, I really need to see a lot more of his story for me to feel like he's a main storyline, as opposed to just like an NPC character that is used as a plot device to help Lucy's background.
Sure. I am more interested in his storyline than the rest. I think his storyline is, I think they did, but I'll say this, I think they did a great job in making, for me, each of the 4 characters' storylines interesting enough. And I think that there's a big overlapping conspiracy going on with the Maclean family, because you get this, like you see, like early on, I think when Moldaver is entering the vault or whatever, like there's that kind of like recognition, like there's a whole thing like, why didn't they kill him? Why is the dad even alive? What is going on? What was their purpose? You know what I mean? And then you're kind of seeing what's going on in 32, and I'm like, well, that's just plain interesting. Like, I called it from the beginning that they were raiders, like that part was obvious, but that's fine. But then I was like, well, wait a minute, like as soon as I saw the crops were dead, I was like, if they had just shown up, though, the crops wouldn't be that dead. Like, what's happening? Like, and so seeing all of this sort of unrolling with him, and I'm like, all right, well, now we find out that his mom's thing was a Pip-Boy was used to open it. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is so interesting. And even like, to make it more interesting is when Lucy introduces herself to anybody with Maclean, everybody is like, well, no, that's interesting. You know, like, oh, Maclean, like this is much bigger. And I think what's happening in the vaults is more central to what's going on than we realize. So I'm super interested to see what's going on behind that third door. So, you know, with because you see that it's that triangle of vaults, and I was like, well, what the fuck is going on in 31? That's where the dad was from. What the hell is happening? So I'm very interested to see these answers questions being answered.
How do you know that these people on the wasteland aren't just like diehard fans and they recognize her name?
Like, how would they know her name? I don't know.
They're like, oh yeah, Bruce Willis's daughter. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah, they all watched Bruce Willis movies growing up, and this is the only thing they know, and so they really loved Live Free and Die Hard, the fourth one, because it's.
Oh no, I did black that out completely.
No, the fifth one is anyway, but like I'm more intrigued. I want to see the rest of their storylines. Don't get me wrong, but I'm really, 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 really invested in what the hell is happening inside the vaults. I'm super interested. So
it's a cool storyline.
Yeah, I think he's a main. I think he's a main character. He is the main character, and we all don't know it yet.
Wow. Interesting. You guys said everything that I would have wanted to say, so I'll just say I'll end with a final thought that I think we could be witnessing easily the rise of like the next leader of some semi-big, wasteland group, whatever that may be, a large group of large raiders. Or I think he's a definite potential mastermind, ruthless leader, and he hasn't even had the chance to be ruthless yet because he's been in the vault this whole time. And I think once it gets some power outside of the vault, I think we could see a real powerful leader take place and leading whatever. And I hope that's true, because I think it'd be very fascinating to see unfold and have him be kind of like an enemy of sorts. And I think he has that potential, so that would be cool.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm glad that you guys have like different perspectives about this character than I do, as far as it being a main character or not. We're just gonna end on some final little thoughts, something that we kind of typically go through, but I just thought we'd just touch on it. Is like any fun Easter eggs or a scene that you guys particularly like? Dan, is there something that you really liked Easter egg wise or fun scene? I mean,
this whole show is an Easter egg. This whole show has so many little details, and like they talk anytime they just say like, oh, I'm gonna have a bowl of sugar bombs, or she's like, I'm using this Abraxo cleaner, or I don't even know, Nuka-Cola, like all the little products that you find in the game, they all mention them by name. And anytime I just see that, or just Vault Boy giving the thumbs up, I'm like, this is real. Like they're doing it. Everything looks so legit. Mm-hmm. It's funny that we spent the whole time talking about like the characters, because that's not even like close to my favorite part. The sets and the effects and like all the music. Oh my god, the music it's so well done and has really encapsulates the vibe of Fallout. I mean, I love seeing the real life wasteland threats come to life. When we saw we see the Yao Guai, the bear. We saw a rad roach for a second, even though it was kind of dark. But the big surprise for me that I didn't see coming at all was the Gulper during the lake scene. The Gulper is a very, very late addition to the Fallout universe and was only introduced in the Fallout 4 DLC. Far Harbor, when there's a lot more marshlands and a lot of like lakes surrounding, or not like the ocean surrounding the area, and it was a very interesting choice. Like I was so sure it was a Mirelurk, which is like this giant crab thing, and it was this gulper, which is like it looks like a whatever, I don't know how you say it, whatever. I mean,
Axolotl.
Yeah, that's the one. And the fact that they gave a little detail of little human fingers inside the mouth. What a detail.
So creepy.
What a great job they did with that. And I was so thrilled to see that, of just kind of a little bit of a deep cut of the threats. I love seeing any wasteland threats come to life on the big screen. So that's mine.
I would say, of course, the music that just like sets the mood in a different whole nother level in the dimension. Every single song they play has kind of a plot device that it talks about and fits very well with the scene, just like Let's Go Sunning, and while they're like the first time that she's walking out into the wasteland for Lucy. This is a good example of that. I love the little details of like the technology and how it looks and sounds. Like the computers sound like the computers in the game. The Pip-Boy screens and the computer screens, the way that it's like that old DOS format and kind of looking thing is exactly how it is in the game. You would think in 2077 they're not still using DOS, but that's kind of the charm of this like retro futuristic feel to it, Like it's a little bit of the past, but it's also of the future as well. So I really, really like that. And my favorite scene, because it's so similar to so many scenes in the game, is that feeling of when the airship from the Brotherhood of Steel first show up and you see your first guy in power armor just like sauntering around, and you're like, what? Like, because like the power armor in the Brotherhood of Steel is something that's such a prominent image for even people who haven't played the game. They've probably seen a picture of somebody, and yeah, it's the cover of so many games of power armor. So having that scene where you see the knights walking around in power armor and the airship, I don't know what airship it is, showing up, it's just like the awe, and you could feel for Maximus when he looks at that, and the awe of that monstrous machine when you've been living on this tiny little base for your whole life, and it's probably amazing, So Tim?
Man, I love this show so much. We did not stop watching at 4. I was like, I'm gonna keep going, man. I'm doing a great job of not saying things that happened in 5 and 6, but it's fun. The action is perfect for what it is, because the games are from what I played, you're not it's a shooter and it's all that, but like it's a difficult shooter for me, even because like you're shooting at different parts, so it's not like you're gonna have these massive battles and fights that I remember from what I played, but like it really fits for this genre, for what they're doing, because they make it more about what's happening. That fight scene with what was it? It was like the Ghoul, the Knight were fighting in that in Philly, in that town. Like, yes, it was like a stumbling kind of fight because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing in this armor yet. But like, I was like, this is just cool. Like when he shoots and the Ghoul shoots everybody in the town real quick, and I was like, this just fits. I love the way it looks, the way it feels. It feels real. The whole show feels like it is actually in this wasteland. The last thing TV show that we did was Avatar, and it didn't feel like it was part of a real world. So like to get to now watch something that is like brought to actual life on screen is super cool. Like I thought that the suit, that the vault suit that she was gonna wear was gonna look super cheesy on screen. It works so fucking well, like just so perfectly. The soundtrack, the acting is on point for who these characters are. They all seem to be doing a very great job being either naive or brainwashed cult member, which it seems like is the Brotherhood, and like all these things. I'm very excited to continue finishing this show and see where it goes. And if there's not another season, I riot. I'm in the capital city. I will burn this motherfucker down if we don't get another fucking season, because this thing is fantastic. I'm really loving it because it's deep as shit, but it's so light and easy to watch and to digest. It's great. It's freaking tastic. One big Vault Boy thumbs up, which is not him giving a thumbs up. It's as they describe in the opening of the show, they're measuring how far away they are from a nuclear blast, which is just that much more fucked up and dark humor. And I love dark humor. So carry on with this show, please.
Predictions, Tim. What do you think?
Prime.
Predictions.
Man, I think I said them, really, that giant conspiracy where everything is connected with, if and when they finally reach Moldova, whatever her name is, and learning about the parents, the heritage there, and who these people actually are, I think is going to come out to be some big conspiracy, and there's going to not be. I don't think there's going to be a Vault 33 anymore, or if there is, it's not going to be anybody from the Maclean lineage. I do agree with Dan. I think this guy's going to leave or like take over the Vault, and it's going to change the dynamic. Like, I think this whole dynamic, there's going to be a crazy dynamic shift on every front in each person's life. They're going to shift to a new archetype towards the end of this season. The Ghoul's going to go from bad to good. I don't know what's going to happen with Maximus after Dan's prediction, because I liked that. He might die, in my opinion, because he might end up like wanting to impress her more than giving in to his cult status. But I think she's going to become some rough and tumbling fucking badass, which I'm very excited for. And Norm is for sure going to overthrow the overseers and whoever's left, in charge of 33 / whatever is happening in 31. So super excited. I wouldn't be also surprised if some of these threads were left undone by the end of the show, so that they can tidy them up in the next season.
Mm-hmm. So Dan?
I don't have predictions per se. I'm like, much like real life, I'm all about the wildlife in this show. And I want to see more. I want to see Mirelurk. Give me that rad scorpion. But what I really want to see, and I want a proper build up to more than anything in this show, is a Deathclaw. Give me that epic Deathclaw showdown scene in the finale, please.
Apex Predator, dude. Apex Predator, the Wasteland.
The top of the food chain in the Wasteland. You see a Deathclaw, you are not above level 20, you run. That is the rule.
I don't even know what a Deathclaw is, so I'm excited to find out.
Yeah, it sounds about as terrifying. The name suits it, we'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. For me, I really for like the way I see the game, and I love how you guys have different points of view. For the way I saw the show was like, if this was the game, like Lucy is sort of like the main character in that way. So I feel like it's her story that kind of drives the overall plot forward, but also it's in many ways her question of like her moral standards and stuff like that is sort of what the Wasteland and post-apocalyptic series and stories are about. Is like, does the Wasteland change the person, and does the main character have the ability to change the Wasteland? You know what I'm saying? Like, how much does the Wasteland change Lucy? How much, as you, the main character in the video game or in the show, can affect this whole entire Wasteland that has been deprived of the moral standards that you've been grown up to, kind of. So that's the part that I'm looking forward to. And just overall general feelings about the show. Like I said, I came into it with like really low expectations. I saw a few trailers and I was like, oh, that looks pretty good, but just very optimistic, but mild expectations. And this show like blew me out of the water. Everything that I wanted or expected, it has pretty much done like really well. So I cannot wait. I agree. More seasons. I can't just live with more. So Tim, same thing, I guess.
I mean, I just said it. That was that was the whole thing. I want more. I'm obsessed with this show already. And it's really, say what you will about like Witcher, but I think between Witcher, Last of Us, and this, we're seeing a massive dynamic shift in where good stories are being pulled from for the silver screen, or for the right, little one is the silver screen, whatever we are for TV. So I'm really glad that this is coming on the heels of Last of Us, because we're gonna like hopefully see a lot of other really well adapted video games in TV. I'm sick of video game movies.
A lot of
'Cause
similarities.
no movie in 2 hours will be enough to capture 65 plus hours of gameplay.
Absolutely.
It's just not. It's not possible.
So many
they need
similarities
to
in the series too, like between
stop.
Fallout and this, right? This TV show and Last of
of
Us.
Us?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
many
yeah.
similarities in characters.
That's true. That is true. Oh, that's very true.
Something we could talk about next time.
Yeah. So speaking of next time, I have a special announcement. So anyone who
Wait,
gets it
did
to
Dan-
the end of this episode,
Did Dan
Oh,
talk
it's-
about like what he thought,
Did we?
just in general?
Everything
Oh, I
we've
apologize.
talked about, sets, effects, props, costumes, the music.
Dan hated it. No kidding.
They're nailing it. They're nailing the hell out of it. I don't think I've seen anything. It's so good. It's so good to the point where, like, even if the story wasn't this good, I'd still be all in because they're doing such a good job with everything else. But the story is still pretty good, and you add everything else in. I echo my friend's sentiments. More seasons, please. Looking forward to everyone's story intertwining more. I've always found that that's when I'm the most glued to the set. So that's it.
Okay.
More, please.
Sorry, Dan.
Please,
Sorry,
I
Tim.
want some more.
No, thank you, George and Dan. I don't ever want to cut anybody off. So, yeah, this is so we've done this. This is the first half. We're gonna do a second half. However, the format of the next episode is going to be a little different because I have confirmed we will have a special guest with us. I have a friend who worked on the Fallout show. Now, he was a lighting designer or director for the show. So we'll have a portion of this that's going to be talking more about the way this show came into being. So I've confirmed it. We got to work on some times and details and stuff like that, but look forward to having that conversation with another person. I will announce that in my Instagram. So make sure to follow the Instagram if you don't already. That's where I do most of the content right now. So follow that and you'll get some more updates as we get closer to deciding a time on when we're going to talk about it. But we're also going to try and get these out quickly. So I'm hoping within a week-ish, we can get this next half out for you guys to enjoy and bring everybody some new content for Fallout from Amazon/MGM. Which is why I think it's getting better because they bought MGM, and so they have an actual studio that they can utilize to make movies and TV shows.
God,
Like,
I forgot about that. It was MGM.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That makes that makes a lot of sense. Actually,
a
you're
little
totally
bit,
right.
yeah, because. But we talk about that at some other point in time. Actually, I'd like to. But anyway, that was it. This was. Let us know what you thought of this show. If anybody didn't like it, fuck off. Don't talk to me ever again. No, I'm kidding. We want to know.
Why.
I love hearing everybody's opinions. So please let us know. Shout out in the comments. Please leave them down there. I will be as active as possible. And as always, if you've had a good time, we have been a Modern Nerd. And thank you for watching.